The North Charleston Police Department works every day to provide a safe and secure community for all of its citizens. As I've stated to you before, when I was sworn in January 2018, we don't see colors in the police department. The only color we deal with is red. Red tells us where crime is at, and we're going to go to the crime. It's our job to protect the lives and property of all our citizens in North Charleston, all of us. And that's what we do every day. It's a hard job, yes it is. We're not asking anybody to feel sorry for us. We just want to do the job to keep our people safe. And going out and being proactive is a key to solving crimes and preventing crimes. As the Chief of Police, it is with utmost confidence that this, as any allegation of misconduct, will be properly investigated through a fair and stringent process. The North Charleston Police Department obliges its Office of Professional Standard, IA, to conduct objective and impartial investigations into all complaints, concerns, and allegations in order to promote transparency and community confidence in this department, as well as the overall mission of our department, which includes adhering to the highest ethical standards of personal and professional conduct. So when we received the information that day on the 12th, we actually started an investigation internally. We never received any external complaint. No one came from the outside here to actually do a formal complaint. We self-initiated ourselves. Never did any of our officers profile or target Mr. Joshua Lewis. On May 12th, last week, Tuesday, City Councilman of the City of North Charleston, Ron Brinson, contacted me and asked me if I'd heard anything about former City Councilman Lewis's grandson being arrested in the City of North Charleston. So what we did was we sat down with Councilman Brinson and actually tried to get information from him pertaining to exactly who Lewis' son was. And we got that information through reports that we had on file. That was May the 12th. Looked at one video that we had pertaining to Joshua Lewis. So Councilman Brinson made a call to City Councilman for the City of Charleston, Keith Waring. He asked Keith Waring on that day, May the 12th, he opened an invitation was open for Keith Waring and former Councilman Lewis to meet with Councilman Brinson and myself and executive staff to talk about the interactions with Joshua Lewis, his grandson. On the morning of the Wednesday, I received a call from Councilman Brinson from the City of North Charleston that he never received a return call on if they were going to come in and meet with us that morning. So therefore, the invitation was open for former City Councilman Lewis, and we never received a telephone call, or he never came into City of North Charleston on last week when we found out about the interactions with his grandson. The North Charleston Police Department had 3 separate encounters with the 21-year-old Joshua Lewis between 10:30 p.m. on May the 7th, which was a Wednesday, and 12:50 a.m. on Friday, which was May the 9th. The first encounter happened on the evening of May the 7th. Officer Jellicoe saw a vehicle while on routine patrol with its tag light being out. He actually saw the vehicle, and by our state law 56-5-45-30, that's a violation. He proceeded to perform a traffic stop. He performed the traffic stop near Rivers Avenue in Carsgrove, which happened to be right next door to our South Bureau Police substation. When Officer Jellicoe approached the silver sedan, the back rear window of the driver's side went down halfway. Officer Dillico asked the driver, can he have his driver's side window to come down so he can speak with him directly? The young man in the car obliged and raised the rear window up and down the front window halfway. Officer Jellicoe actually spoke with the young man, and he informed the young man, and he told him why he stopped him, and he advised him that the tag light was out. And once the conversation continued, the young man was asked for his credentials, which is license, registration, insurance information. Officer Jellicoe then was told by the driver, Joshua Lewis, that he did not have a license in his possession. Officer Jellicoe then told him that he would actually need to have some information from him personally, his name, full name, date of birth, so he can actually run his driver's license through the system. And he told him once he got back that all he would want to do was actually make sure everything was checked out fine, and he would actually be on his way. During the traffic stop, other officers arrived on the scene, which I stated before, it occurred right next to the substation in the southern part of the city. Some officers drove up, some officers walked up. While Officer Jellicoe was actually running the driver's license information through the records department, one of the officers walked up and said that they had smelled marijuana. That was Officer Justice. So Officer Jellicoe told Officer Justice, we need to ask him for consent if he has any illegal drugs in his vehicle. Officer Justice and Officer Peoples went to the car, and they asked Mr. Joshua Lewis, the driver of the vehicle, for consent because they had smelled marijuana emanating from the vehicle. Joshua Lewis stated that he did not want to give the officers an ability to go and search the car. So both officers went back to the initiating officer, which is Jellicoe. And when he got back, they asked Jellicoe, Officer Jellicoe, were you able to smell marijuana when you initially went to the car? Officer Jellicoe stated to them that I couldn't smell it because I had just made an arrest with marijuana in my rear trunk. Therefore, my nose may not be something that you want to use. You need to do it because you guys smell it. I did not. So that's why they went back to the car by law and advised Joshua Lewis that if he didn't give them consent, he has that right, but they were going to call out a canine officer to come out to do an exterior search of the vehicle. When the Charleston County Sheriff's Department came out with their canine unit, the officers briefed the canine units on what they had. Once that briefing was done, the officers went to the car, Officer Peoples and Officer Jenkins, to ask Joshua Lewis to exit the vehicle while the canine performed an external search. The passenger in the car complied. He got out of the car, walked to the side, the officers patted him down for weapons, and they placed him in the back of the car so he will be out of the way while the canine searched the car. While this is going on, Joshua Lewis refused to step out of the car, and he kept talking to the officers and saying, well, I don't know why I have to get up the car, and they explained to him why. Then it, asked him again, and then Officer People said, well, just come out the car so we can have the canine search the car. And he started to move out of the car, slowly, but he started to move out, and when he finally got out, the officers told him, well, we're going to pat you down, and when they started that, he placed his hand inside his shorts. And the officers kept telling him, take your hands or remove your hands out of your shorts. And that's when they actually handcuffed him and they placed him on the ground away from the car. Once the officers removed Joshua Lewis from the vehicle, and they asked him to stop reaching for his waistband. They placed him on the ground. They actually searched the vehicle, and when they searched the vehicle, they located several $20 bills and several $100 bills on the seat and under the floorboard. There were what we call shake, and shake is basically marijuana and seeds and different particles. They found a small quantity of that on the floor and in the seat area. Lewis actually received a failure to have a driver's license in possession, which is South Carolina Code Section 56120, and he got a warning citation for the tag light. He was not arrested at that point in time and was given a court date pending. The second encounter with Mr. Lewis occurred on a Friday, which was May the 9th at 12:50 a.m. The two officers were on patrol and were conducting a traffic stop in the area of Rivers Avenue near Stokes Avenue when they noticed a Dodge Ram truck driving recklessly around a smaller four-door silver sedan. Moments later, the officers heard shots from the direction of the two vehicles. The officers advised other units of the situation. Units arrived in the area and attempted to locate the vehicles involved. Sergeant Green advised that the two suspects flee from the Silver Jaguar had been involved with the shots fired incident. Sergeant Green got the tag number of the Silver Jaguar, which was located in the parking lot of the Country Inn Suites and Hotel, which is located at 7429 Stafford Road off of Ashley Phosphate. When the officers arrived at the hotel, the Silver Jaguar was in the parking lot. The officers asked the hotel clerk if the Jaguar belonged to any of her guests. She said she did not know, but the two people had just run into the hotel and they had actually pried the hotel door, which manually opens. They pried it open because they were hurriedly trying to run inside the hotel. She stated that they ran into room number 201. Officers, according to the protocol that we are trained to do, cleared the other floors of the hotel thoroughly before making any contact at the room 201, which was in question. Before the officers actually attempted to go up to room 201, they asked the clerk again, who rented room 201? The clerk stated, Lewis Joshua. She provided them a piece of paper with an ID picture of the person who rented the room. The officers actually went up to room 201 after they cleared the hotel and knocked on the door with the intent to speak with the person who rented room 201. There was a very slow response at the door. Sergeant Green, who actually was the supervisor at the scene, continued to knock on the door until someone opened the door slightly. He spoke to the individual and stated that he needed to speak with the person who rented the room and asked them to exit the room into the hallway so he can speak with them because there was some illegal activities going on outside of the hotel. The individual who opened the door slightly closed the door back. Several minutes later, Sergeant Green knocked on the door once and asked again for them to come out, and then the door opened up. The first person that opened the door stated that he rented the room, and they asked him who he was. He said, my name is Joshua Lewis. The officers asked him to exit the room, and they looked in the room and they saw at least 7 other individuals behind Mr. Lewis in that room, lined up. The officers actually pulled Mr. Lewis to the side so they can get all the occupants in the room out in the hallway safely. Mr. Lewis started to stiffen up while the 2 officers were trying to move him down to the other side of the hall to create room. When he stiffened up, the officers actually placed him in a detention to handcuff him. And while this is going on, the other officers escorted all the other occupants out, and everybody was laid down. They were handcuffed, they were searched, and they were actually placed on the side so they can get information from them in reference to their identities. The occupants in that room, other than Mr. Lewis, were all in their teens or early 20s. Two of the occupants were minors. All were in violation of the governor's COVID-19 order in regards to congregating in that room. Officers smelled odor of marijuana smoke emanating from out of the room. Once they cleared the room and got the individuals detained, they did what they were trained to do, go into the room and clear it. And they cleared the room, and they're looking to see if they can find any contraband or illegal drugs or any weapons. None was found. They actually checked with all the occupants' information. And once they did that, they released everyone without an arrest. The hotel night manager asked law enforcement to remove all the subjects in that hotel. We obliged her request and asked all the subjects to leave the property. The subjects and the police officers returned to the parking lot. The officers asked all the subjects that were there once they came out of the hotel about the silver Jaguar that was in the parking lot. Initially, all the parties denied knowing anything about the car or its owner. Ultimately, one of the subjects, Mr. Wright, advised that the Jaguar was one of his homeboys, and they were waiting for him to return so they could leave. Mr. Wright would not provide a name of the owner to the officers. Then, after Mr. Wright spoke, Joshua Lewis began asking the officers what they were going to do with that Jaguar. Mr. Lewis continued to ask about the vehicle, but he seemed hesitant to give us information on who owned the vehicle. Ultimately, Mr. Lewis walked away from the scene and got into a blue Ford Escape along with 3 other subjects. The blue Ford Escape, therefore, returned to the hotel parking lot later on. And this is the third contact that law enforcement had with Mr. Lewis. When the Ford Escape pulled up to the hotel parking lot, Mr. Lewis jumped out of the Ford Escape because he's a passenger and retrieved an item from the Jaguar. Then he got back into the Ford Escape. Officers saw this and they initiated a traffic stop because that silver sedan was in question from a crime. Once the officers stopped the Ford Escape, there were 4 individuals in that vehicle. The officers told the driver to turn the ignition off, and while he was doing that, another officer visually saw a butt of a weapon between the legs of some of the occupants in the car. Naturally, officers know that that's a weapon that could harm them or someone. So the officers ordered all of the occupants out of the car. They placed them all back in the rear of the car, searched them to make sure they didn't have any weapons, and then the officers proceeded to clear the car. What the officers found that they could visually see between the legs of the occupants was this. The officers visually saw that. That's why they ordered them out of the car. Once they ordered them out of the car, they retrieved this weapon and cleared the entire vehicle. This is a shotgun. When the weapon, the shotgun, was found in the car, after all the subjects were asked to be removed out of the car, The sergeant retrieved the weapon, the shotgun. He cleared the weapon. We asked every occupant in that car who this weapon belongs to, because this weapon was in that car between the seats and the legs of the occupants. No one in that car took possession of this weapon. They all denied knowing anything about this weapon. So therefore, we took the weapon for safekeeping, and no one was arrested after this traffic stop. We are tasked to do the job that the citizens expect us to do, which is to be there to make sure that their lives are safe, the communities are crime-free. We are not ever going to turn our heads away from crime. We're not going to do that. I've been doing it for 31 years in July. I am not running away from crime. They're not running away from crime. If crime is there, we're going to the crime. So that is what we do. Our job is to deal with the crime so our community can be safe. And that is exactly what North Charleston Police Department is about, is to make this city and improve the quality of life of its citizens on every minute of every day. And we're going to do it, and we're not going to run away from crime. We're going to crime.